Sorry. So I'm delighted now to introduce you to Jane Burt, who is a newcomer to Wincanton, and extraordinary. I asked her how she gets here, and it's like we all get asked how do we get to Wincanton. I don't know how we got here. It's so random, it's ridiculous. And as I'm sure I've told you a million times, everybody else hasn't told you, I was told I was here as a witch with no power 500 years ago, and I thought I was a witch with power. Everybody here is the witch, let's face it. Crone, a powerful woman, a medicine woman, woman with strength and power and wisdom, that's what we all are. So I've asked Jane, it was just, I was sat, shows you the magic, I'm standing here with the group the other day saying, I really think it would be wonderful to have a new person that I could speak to and interview as I usually do, rather than listen to me all night. And as I said it, Jane walked in, and I knew that Jane had started an NGO in South Africa, and she was a member, and she was absolutely a perfect person to talk to, because I personally have a huge love of South Africa and South African women, and we were talking about that just now, and the extraordinary strength that the indigenous women of South Africa show in the poorest of situations, and do truly miracles, bringing up the children and really trying to get a healthy, wholesome village going under really very ludicrously poor circumstances, no water, growing their own grains. Whole generations of South African parents have disappeared with AIDS. I mean, it's not an easy country to live, and yet the spirit is remarkable. So it's wonderful to have Jane and Jenny, who didn't know each other before tonight, which is all about the magic of here, both from South Africa, here tonight, and to be able to talk to Jane about the NGO that she founded, and what the hell she's doing here, how did she get here, how extraordinary is that, and the work she's doing and has done for many, many years, working with all sorts of NGOs, not-for-profit organisations throughout South Africa, and the mentoring you do, and the working with young South Africans you do. So I almost feel like I should just pass it on, you should just tell your story. Firstly, how did you get here? That's the remarkable thing.
To Wincanton.
To Wincanton.
So this is not, is this working? But you can hear me. Yeah. This is rather a mundane story. Actually, well, I suppose it has multiple strands to it. And I suppose this is a story of loss and grief as well. I came to the UK mainly because I personally was suffering from PTSD from my work in South Africa. So I needed to be in a place where I could be safe for a while, which is one of the reasons why I came here. And my partner also got a job here, so we decided to come over. I was originally born here, and we went to South Africa when I was 22 months old. And the strange thing is, I've always the England in my mind, being a South African and having like lived through I voted for the first time in 1994. So the history of South Africa is so embedded in my body that it was hard to imagine ever being anywhere else. Actually, I just feel like crying talking about it, so I'm sorry if I do cry. But so coming here was rather hard because I suppose in my political journey in South Africa and in the work that I've done, part of the trauma of South Africa is colonization as well as apartheid. So I was, coming to England felt like a kind of betrayal in some ways. But I have a British passport, so we came here, and my partner had a good job here, so we could, and I carried on my work here. I also came here because I'd started trying to bridge the gap between the work I was doing in South Africa, and I suppose one of my passions in life is to really help the rest of the world see. Sorry, that's no problem.
There. You'll be outside. Or, do you want to go outside?
That's fine. I have a dog.
Ignore it.
Yeah. Let me think where I was.
Sorry.
Yeah. So coming to the UK felt like this strange betrayal in a way. But on coming here, it also forced me to see that what had happened to my country was not done by the people of the UK. It was done by powerful people that had power and did atrocious things because of that. Just as the apartheid government in South Africa did that, didn't mean that all South Africans were party to that in some way, or a lot of them were deep victims of it. And that was really healing for me, having been born here. So I've really tried to embrace my ancestry, and and find my grandmothers here. I found my great-great-great-grandmother in Bristol. We arrived in Bristol, never been in Bristol before in my life. And to find out that my great-great-grandmother is from Bristol, and her grave is literally 10 minutes away from our house. So it was a real sort of like coming to terms with that part of myself, and I've done some other work on like where my ancestors are. Coming to Wincanton is a very simple story. It's a friend of mine has come over to the UK as well from South Africa to look after her elderly parents, and she had a house in Wincanton, and we are here to help her fix it up, and it's just a solidarity exchange really. I don't know anything about Wincanton at all, but as soon as I saw your website, I just felt that there's a possible space for me to belong, because I have struggled to find belonging since I've been here. And already just being here a week, I've felt more at home here than, so thank you. I loved what you said earlier about the Gogos, and the Gogos holding the power that bring community together. And Gogos is the word for grandmother in South Africa. Yeah, so I'll stop there. That's my story of getting there.
And the South African, something was being said at the table here, was South African women of all colours, and there are all colours in South Africa, are all very, in their own way, very powerful. And there's lots of interesting initiatives going on. But for the African women, the black women, the rural women who suffer real poverty, it is very, very difficult. And we've got the townships, as you probably know if you haven't been there and have read, where you have extreme poverty, particularly townships in Johannesburg and in Cape Town, which I have been to, and really heartbreaking. And yet miracles happening within those townships. I got very friendly with a woman called Rose, who ran an orphanage there, black woman, and everybody knew they would find babies in plastic bags and children all over the place. They've got nowhere to go, and everyone would take them to Rose, and then she'd make sure they got. At that point, when I was last there 10 years ago or so, it was even more prevalent with HIV/AIDS, and children were getting it, and they were making sure she would make sure they got their medicines, their injections, they were fed. It was extraordinary what she did actually there. And yet, you were talking about getting burnt out. And who supports those who do the supporting? That's the big question mark. So for Rose, it was like she was holding this whole community together in this particular area at Cape Town's in the township. Like, she would burn out. So we started talking about meditation, and I gave her a candle, a big fat candle that she lit and kept. And she came over to England with a couple of the other women with this charity I work with. I was volunteering, that a friend of mine started called African Solutions for African Problems. And they literally didn't have shoes. They brought these women over to talk at this fundraiser. But I remember taking them to buy shoes down Portobello Road. It was just ridiculous. But then you've got the rural women, which is another whole thing, where they still have to walk miles to get the water every day if the children don't do it. And this is something you've been very involved in. So do you want to talk about your charities and the whole situation with water? And
yeah, so what most people know about apartheid is the separation of races. What is deeper than that is the access to resources. And the place where I started working is in a rural area in the Eastern Cape. It was a former homeland. And there's South Africa is also not like here, there's loads of water here. In South Africa, water's like very, very scarce. It's precious. I mean, I'm sure you would have heard maybe the children have the song that they sing about water, and the translation is it's raining, amanzi the joy, you know, so amanzi, sorry, it's water, so it's raining, water the joy. And they sing that over and over again, so it's like a well-known song at least in the isiXhosa areas in South Africa.
And I should say at this point, one of the many things I love about working with African people, generally, well, women particularly, is that everything is a song and everything is a dance.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a workshop, we would stop now and we'd start dancing around the room, chanting and singing, which we will be doing. In a couple of weeks, I will be doing it.
Yeah.
But I mean, this whole how they bring music and dancing just becomes part of breathing, really, and it's wonderful and joyful.
And I think that's also part of the way of healing trauma.
Yes.
That singing and dancing together, because I definitely found that it kept my resilience going a lot of the time. Was that kind of just singing and dancing like spontaneously together. So in this area, under apartheid, the dam was built, and only white farmers could say when water was released from the dam. So in this particular area, the homeland was at the top of the catchment, and then the river ran down, and the big citrus farms and other farms were sort of in the middle of the catchment and the lower catchment before the water went into the sea. So because the homeland, and of course because of apartheid, that would have been the way where the Xhosa people lived. When apartheid ended, one of the big missions was to change every single law that enabled this practice to happen. So the law in South Africa was that basically only people that had farms could or had some kind of economic value could say when the dam water was released. It was only released for farmers. So you can imagine in the dry season and in droughts, the river would dry up and there'd be no water. And I mean, I literally worked with women that would literally go to mud puddles to try and find water. So that was I was very young at the time, but I think...
How did you get involved? How did you start? Did you start in uni or?
Well, it's a weird story as well. I became a puppeteer. Huh. And I was working in rural areas and rural schools, doing all sorts of education with puppets. And I then got very involved in a practice called Theatre of the Oppressed, which comes from Latin America, which is looking at how theatre can be used as a voice for people that have been oppressed. So I started working with that as well. And a researcher from the university where I had studied contacted me to help with a project that they were doing in the area to try and understand the value of water from an indigenous perspective. So they were trying to use that as an avenue of pushing change. So I brought in theatre and puppetry to start that storytelling. And then I got drawn in even further to then start facilitating this process of getting white farmers and the people in the Xhosa people in the upper catchment to start actually negotiating the change in how the dam was managed. And like you say, the most amazing thing was although the men were the speakers at that time, it was the women that were driving it, because they were driving it, they wanted water for their children. So that was what was driving this push. And it was that really, and I suppose the other thing that really struck me in that space as well was how, as you say, the children are not brought up by one woman. They're really brought up by everybody.
Yes, it really is the whole village. It takes a whole village to bring up a child. Since there's a lot of children.
Yeah. And that was from my own sort of isolated, I suppose, white upbringing. It was profound for me to see this. Absolutely profound to see these children just being cared for by whoever was there. And with any child could go into any house and they would be fed. It didn't matter. So that was a real, I suppose, a huge learning for me of what women can do.
As a community.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. That when they put children first, when they put and I don't have children myself, but I learned also from that situation, you don't have to have children to be a mother. You can mother the environment, the planet, you can mother any child that's around you. So I suppose that was the learning from that, and then that carried on into all sorts of other work.
and so you actually founded, or co-founded, an NGO, I guess it is.
So I worked under the title Real Life Learning, because my passion is mostly around learning and education, and I'm seeing how that can bring about transformative change. And in the beginning it was small, but recently it's become a lot bigger, because I've shifted my focus from just doing the projects that are in South Africa to also trying to mentor in young Africans into the research and evaluation and education space. So it's gone beyond, and this is the interesting thing as well, that I don't know quite how to say it, but coming to the UK, it's hard to explain how. The word I would use for it is cognitive justice, so that the injustice in whose thoughts are heard and whose ideas are heard in the world. Coming to the UK, I started to be listened to, and that's given me the power to start trying to navigate the listening of others, if that makes sense.
Yes. Extraordinarily, because life is extraordinary, as you're talking, I've just realised, do any of you know about 42 Acres, which is this amazing rewilding space where you know Seth? The family that own this fantastic rewilding space not far from here, who Laura and I are friendly with, the guy, young man and his family. They are South African, they've gone back to South Africa, and they're hugely philanthropical. And he's also running he's got a big event in the Eastern Cape in November for all sorts of family offices of families who are looking for projects to work on. So I'm going to totally tell him about what you're doing, and I just think, how amazing is it that here we are sitting in Wincanton, and yet all life can be connected somehow through wherever you are. If you start opening up and telling your stories, but there is magic here, there is magic here. The connections here that go all around the world is wonderful. And the other thing we were talking about in South Africa is I have become friendly with a wonderful woman called Lynne Tucker, South African woman who runs something called the White Lion Trust. And Jane knows Lynne Tucker, and it's a part of South Africa where traditionally white lions, and I've now found out from Jenny, they're not exactly dead white, I thought they're fawn. This particular, they've all been shot for the pelts or stolen for zoos, and they are a very spiritual animal, which is supposed to be there a bit like, what's the lion from Narnia? Aslan. They're kind of like Aslan. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lions. And Lynne Tucker was given the role, though she's white South African, to look after the lions by some of the older women over there. And so she raises funds to buy the lions and take them back to the wild. She's doing amazing work. And down the road in Glastonbury, I have a friend who does these very small little sound healing nights, and all the money goes to Lynne Tucker's White Lion Trust, and she's friendly with Seth, and you know, life just, well, maybe it's not just me, it's networks upon networks upon networks. So here we are in Wincanton, just amongst ourselves, sharing and networking and learning and feeling held, and at the same time there's this sort of other stuff going on energetically, which is beyond rationale. I find, you know, there's no kind of common, it just happens, synergy just happens, doesn't it? It happens to all of us all the time when we're open to it, and miracles can happen, magic can happen. So I don't think it's any coincidence that you're here, that you've got this South African connection with Jenny now, who coincidentally lived in Ibiza for years, great friends with a friend of mine from Ibiza, who recommended Jenny, got in touch with me. I mean, again, very sort of no rationale to that, but she's here today.
I knew about Wincanton before I knew I was coming to live here in Wincanton.
What did you know about, how did you know about Wincanton? Oh.
And Rachel.
And Rachel. Wow.
And when she knew I was moving to
She said you've got to talk to my friend
England.
Lynne Franks. Yeah.
And we went to the Cotswolds for a while. She said, you've got to come and live near my friend in Wincanton.
this is it. This is it. So we're all here for a purpose. Even those who are thinking of leaving, I'm not looking anywhere special, but have done an amazing amount for this town while they've been here. Hopefully won't be able to sell their house anyway, so they'll be stuck here. We sold the house at good, no. But there's wonderful, wonderful connections here, and there's a lot of other women who aren't here tonight, but who are also doing great things in community. And for a little town, it is just quite remarkable. And then also from South Africa, as I was asking you, there's a guy called Michael Tellinger, which some of you may have heard me talk about before, who started something called One Small Town, which is all a Bantu as well, which is all about one for all and all for one. And it's about, if you get a town of 5,000 people and everybody in it does 3 hours of volunteerism a week, you can do your own economy completely. That's his theory, and he's done a lot of work on it. So, I mean, I don't know how Wincanton's so connected with South Africa, but it obviously is. So right now you're really focusing on getting young South Africans voices in education.
Yeah, so I've started a social enterprise, and it has two bases, one in the UK and one in South Africa. And at the moment we're 18 people that are working particularly at the intersection between gender justice, climate justice, and I suppose more, I say environmental justice as well, because often it has to do with land, you know, who has the right to land, who has the right to resources. And one of so we've chosen the social enterprise model because we want to be able to generate income that we can then invest into other projects.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to generate the income?
We are a bunch of consultants as well, so we do consultancy work. So part of our time is spent doing consultancy work for like Oxfam and other organisations. And then, so we have this model of where we serve to enable other people's social impact that we believe in and that we align with our own. So that's the consultancy work. So we don't see ourselves as traditional consultants. It's more like we're there to serve a social impact that we believe in. And then we are also then generating and starting, what we do is we work with already existing people in Africa that are starting projects within their communities, and then we try and network and partner them with others and support them. So for example, in the same area as Linda Tucker, there's an organisation called Zingelo Wazi that we support, and that means Hunt for Wisdom. That's particularly a women's focused one. And there's also a project called Ratanang, which means we can do this together, which is looking at, basically it's quite amazing. In Bushbuck Ridge in South Africa, it's classified as a rural area, but it's some areas are as densely populated as the Netherlands. It's kind of this, it again was an ex-homeland. And December, who's a very, very spiritual man, found this piece of land in this densely populated area that it's full of biodiversity. It's like the most amazing piece of land. It used to be an old farmland that has been left to go. And he is going to turn that into almost like a centre where people that are living in areas that, you know, there's not much comfort, let's put it that way, to turn it into both a healing place, but then also a place that where people can learn how to do permaculture, and learn other projects that. So the idea is that it's both regenerating the land, but also regenerating local economies. So looking for the connection between that. So he's running that entirely. We just support him, and we're doing the same for a person in Malawi called Chimwemwe, who's unbelievable. He just blows my mind. Him and his wife, literally, they not only have they raised their own children, his wife has raised about 15 other children as well that don't have homes.
You know what?
That's our marriage song.
So I'm sure there's questions from some of you. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask Jane about the work she's been doing or what she's doing in England? Because you said you're working here too. Is that purely consultancy work? Or?
No, we also I mean, the thing about coming to England is I've also realised that, like, my idea, like, just like I was talking to somebody when you were saying the idea of Africa, well, I've had to shift my idea of England. And I've realised that there is also deep poverty here, and deep, you know, and deep trauma. So one of the things that we're looking at in the UK is community resilience, and yeah, so I can't wait to speak to you next week. And try.
Is Jane still here as well? Jane's sitting hidden around there. Sean Barrett, Sue Sean Barrett. Jane works with Somerset Council with foster children and extreme poverty. You should also talk.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Jane's got to rush off in a minute. She's got a new puppy, but we need to connect.
I understand that. Yeah. And particularly looking at how community. So this is the volunteering as well. So looking at often people do a lot of work that is never valued. In South Africa and Africa, it's huge. Like, environmental and social activists will be doing the most amazing stuff, doing so many courses to learn, all in their own time. They never get paid, and they never get an accreditation or a recognition for that learning. So we're looking at how to look at this whole idea of prior learning, which means that the work you do every day, the volunteering you do every day has value, and it can be aligned with a formal system of education. So that for young people particularly, we're looking at that, and also for neurodivergent people that don't necessarily flow through the education system.
Well, there's a lot of that. There's a huge amount of Somerset. So that's, I mean, before, well, I can put you guys in touch, but it might.
We're very early exploring, where we've got this really interesting partner in the UK. That's
very good. Well, there was quite a lot of money going towards that area, what they call over here the NEETs, which is the sort of 16 to 19-year-olds kids that dropped out of the system. I was working via Jane's introduction with an Somerset Works, which is part of Somerset County Council, and there was a glorious moment a few years ago where they raised a huge amount of EU funding. Those days have gone.
Where's any money now?
Exactly. But they were doing great work, but actually getting the kids off the streets and out of their bedrooms was the biggest issue they had. But Balsam Centre do some. You met Sue Gaysha?
I want to go and meet them.
Untraditional.
Yeah.
They're doing some great stuff. But they too, their biggest issue is getting the people. They've got these lovely projects and all sorts of things going on. And they've got a bit of budget from the lottery. But getting people out of their bedrooms and actually signing up is a huge issue. It's really remarkably sad, but we're working on it. So would anybody like to ask Jane anything about what she's been talking about with social enterprise, or please? No?
My feeling was that what sounds like what you're doing is quite broad. And how do you get anything done in amongst that broadness? I mean, all of us, yeah. But you know, most people kind of have a little niche. It seems like you. It's big.
Work to do, isn't it?
And so we focus on two core areas, which is just landscapes and just learning. And so those are the two things that hold real life and hold everybody that works in real life. And then part of that is looking at the crisis in both those spaces. So that's our niche, if you want to call it that. Of course, that's very broad in and of itself. But then
it's a big umbrella.
Yeah, it is. So then we focus also. I mean, education is our calling. And then I'm very, very passionate about place-based initiatives. So people, I call them change projects, finding a change project within your local area and working on that, and that becoming something that you can grow. So that is how we see things, and real life in itself is a change project, because we're trying to understand how we can work differently in an economically just way. So although I'm the founding director, I don't take a salary that is higher than the average UK salary. So we're playing around with things like that as well. But yeah, so to say the focus area is mostly around the power of learning. in different forms, and we work mostly with like young adults up to all ages of adults really.
How many people are in the wing? How many people are
So it's 18 people. We have different. So we're trying to also think about how to work an organisation that's a little bit different, not hierarchical. So we have different layers of the organisation, and I didn't form. Although I founded it, how it has been formed collaboratively. So there is a core group called the Enablers, and there's 7 of us there, and we each represent a country, so that is in real life. And then we have partners who don't really, real life is not their change project, they have other change projects that they want to enable. And so then we work together to see how we can enable those. And part of it, so some of their change projects may just be, I want to earn enough income for my family, and I know that I'm a good educator, so can we, work together? And my passion is landscapes, and my passion is just learning. And then we have associates who are people that literally just want a job. So then we work with them, and then we have friends who are people that are interested in what we do, but they have other work, other commitments that they want to learn together with us.
Do you think the future has to be for charities generally, that they become social enterprises, and there's some way of bringing in an income which then means that you can do the work you want to do, the pro bono work? I mean, it seems to me that funding generally is getting harder and harder and harder. It's hard in this country, and it's hard in every country.
So hard in South Africa.
I'm sure it is, and so much money has been wasted by the governments of all these countries on bad, and COVID and all that rubbish. But there has to be a way where it becomes somehow self-sufficient by earning and giving. It's sort of like getting that balance right.
The other reason why I think as well why we're trying it is because what I found in South Africa when you were just working on grants, sort of we don't call NGOs in South Africa, that charity is a word that people don't like. But anyway, that's another. It's just the history of South Africa. But so part of that is you then are reliant on the terms of your person who's granting money to you, and often you're embedded in the context and you know this isn't going to work, but this is what they're funding. So having the opportunity to both raise your own money and to have grants then just frees up a little bit of flexibility.
I'm also very into the whole aspect of making as well, for women particularly. There was I don't think it's there anymore, but I got involved in a small social enterprise NGO. It was out of Cape Town, which 2 women artists got quite a large group of women with HIV/AIDS together. And do you all know that the kind of, I've got so much of it next door, using plastic to make art. And they were in the airport shop in Cape Town for ages. I've got quite a few of them next door, huge, beautiful sort of African figures that were made out of this wire, and these women would make these beautiful figures and then they would sell them, and then that money would come in and that would help them and their families live. And everybody, it was a win-win, because the people who bought them were delighted, the people that made them got money back. So I'm a huge believer in that as well. And if we can ever somehow do this sort of trading where we're exchanging design ideas and marketing ideas and get the things made and manufactured and then bring them up, because there's a huge amount of very creative skills in South Africa, particularly with the women. So maybe we'll start something like that from here, who knows, get some design and get things made over there and brought back here, or somehow working on it. So, okay, well I think we've just still got dessert to go. I'm sure Jane's not rushing off, and she's here most of the time at the moment. Yes. I'm delighted. So I hope you'll move around and meet other people, and I think we're just really delighted to welcome you here. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us your story.
Thank you for asking.